Hello, everybody. So good that you are joining us here for GitHub Galaxy. I am really pleased to invite you here and show you a few of the exciting things we've got. Today, we're going to be talking about empowering teams for the long term with GitHub's developer-first platform. So that is a mouthful of a title, but what we're really talking about is focusing on how to accelerate high-quality software development and delivery by prioritizing the developer experience. Now, this speaks to me because I have been a developer for about 25 years. My name is Damien Brady. I manage our developer advocacy team at GitHub, and I'm joining you from Brisbane, Australia. Like I said, I've been a developer for about 25 years, but for more than the last decade, I've been focusing on all the stuff that surrounds, writing code, the process, DevOps, and all of the things that come along in that area. And I was at Microsoft in the DevOps Cloud Advocacy team before I joined GitHub almost 2 years ago. I'm joined today as well by Anthony Borton. Anthony, did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, no worries at all. Thanks, Damien. So again, my name is Anthony Borton. I'm Director of Field Services for APAC East at GitHub. I've been in this role now for a little over a year and a half. And in this role, I help a very talented group of solutions engineers help solve business challenges for our customers. Prior to that, I was a DevOps architect at Microsoft for about 3 years, helping some of their largest customers with their DevOps transformation. So I've always been, through my entire career, working with developers, trying to help developers, achieve more day to day. So that's a little bit about me. Back to you, Damien.
Awesome. We're going to go through a couple of pieces of housekeeping first, just before we kick off on the actual session. First of all, Q&A. So if you have a question for either myself or Anthony today, make sure you drop it into the Q&A tab that you should be able to see. We have some people online as well who will answer the questions as we go. And if we have some time at the end, we'll be able to answer some more of those questions as well. For optimal viewing experience, we recommend use Chrome or Edge or Safari. Firefox works as well with the most current version as well. If you aren't able to see the stream, try refreshing the page. And if you're having trouble and you're on a VPN, try disabling the VPN or drop the event link from your calendar in an incognito window. It can sometimes help too. But if this all still doesn't work and you still need troubleshooting issues, please navigate over to the Docs tab on the far right to find some help documents. All right, that is all for the housekeeping. Anthony, I'm going to kick it over to you. Why don't you explain what we're going to do today?
Excellent, thanks. So in this presentation, Damien and I are going to role play, and we're going to showcase a typical use case to clearly illustrate some of the features that promote collaboration, speed up the developer lifecycle, and help teams go to market faster. So in this role play, I am a manager at Damovisa Inc. I think there was some favoritism in the name selected there somehow. I manage a group of talented but overworked software engineers. So welcome along, Damien. We're really excited to have you here at Damovisa Inc.
Yeah, thanks.
That's fantastic.
Just getting into character. Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. Love the name of the company.
Right. Well, it normally takes a couple of days to get a new developer up and running, which I'm sure you've experienced in the past. I know you've got your new work laptop, you've got your email account up and active, but you're going to have to install the tools that we use here at the organization, all the libraries that our developers make use of. We're going to need to also get you to spend some time going through the code to sort of learn a little bit about it, gain some familiarity. I think we have some documentation on that. So how about I go and track down some documentation that should have most of the steps we need for you to follow. And then I'll get one of our developers, hopefully, to check that it's up to date as well. And that should get you ready. So I'm just going to go and check that now.
Okay, great. Good. So I think Anthony's gone. So I'm just going to jump into the code here. This is the project that I got told I was going to work on. So I'm having a look, and immediately I can see there's a dev container folder in here. Now I'm pretty familiar with code spaces. I used them in my last job. So and sure enough, like the README on this repo says use code spaces for ease of development, and there's a 4-step process to actually debug the thing. So I'm going to do that. So normally, like when I create a code space, I can go to the code tab here, and then I can see all the code spaces. You'll see, just stepping out of my persona for a bit, I've already got one. But anyway, but I use code spaces for everything that I have. So if you click up on code spaces here, these are the code spaces that I have across all of my different pieces of work, right? And then just as an aside as well, if I want to just try code spaces and try and use something like React, or if we look at all of them, Jupyter Notebooks or Next.js or so on, I can spin up a code space that's not attached to a repository as well, and just play with that project. And then if I want to use that code space later on for an actual project, I can just write that to a repo and we're off and going. But this told me that I could use a code space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a new code space from here for that repository. So what was it called? It was Demo Visa Inc. Training Quiz. Okay, so that's the repository I'm going to use. Yeah, we'll use the main branch. And there's a training quiz dev container configuration. So I'll talk about that in a sec. We're going to run in Southeast Asia. That's where I am. And you know what? They've given me the option of a 16-core machine as well. So I'm going to use that one. If they didn't want me to use it, they wouldn't have enabled that one. You can see that they've disabled some of the others. So I'm going to use that one. All right, I'll create that code space. But I'm going to show you what I meant by this, this dev container as well, just while that's loading. And you can see how quick this is. It's got a few more steps to run for this brand new code space just to set things up. But I want to show you what that dev container definition looks like. So let's jump in here. And we can see there's a bunch of different files. Now, I could go in depth. I think that would be an hour-long presentation by itself to go in depth about what's in this dev container. You can find out tons of this information in docs on the web as well. But this dev container.json is kind of the key piece here. Now we can see that it's got a name. It's using Docker. So there's a Docker compose file. We'll have a quick look at that in a sec. And then we can set up things like environment variables and settings like the ZSH terminal, which is actually my favorite. So I'm happy about that. And then a bunch of extensions. So you can see straight away, we're using Cosmos DB. So there's an extension in the Visual Studio Code marketplace that lets me talk to Cosmos DB. Azure Static Web Apps as well, and Azure Container Apps, and even Bicep. So it looks like they're using Bicep to run their infrastructure as well. But these extensions mean that when I spin up that code space, I have a development environment in the cloud that is ready to go for this environment. It's ready to go for this project. It has all the things that I need installed in that code space, and I can just get up and running. Now, quickly, let's have a look at that Docker Compose file, and you can see that there's two parts. There's an app service and a Cosmos service. So inside my code space, there will be two services that run at the same time. It looks like there's a Cosmos emulator, so the Cosmos DB database, an emulator, and then I've got my front end thing, which is probably where I'm writing my code. All right, this should be well and truly ready by now. Oh, we're still running the post create command. So you can also run, I'll just show you this, in our dev container JSON. Down the bottom, you can set a post create command. And so in this case, it's doing an npm install for workspaces and then a dev container post setup script. So if you wanted to run more scripts, and it looks like in this case they need to, it'll run that once the dev container is created. Right, let's see where we're up to. We've got a couple of things on Copilot Voice. Let's all just pretend we didn't see that one. So we've got our project here. We have a debugging environment. And then, so what do we do? What do we need to do next? We need to create a code space. We've done that. And then we need to run the bootstrap task. So let's look over in our debug window, look at the tasks, and there you go. There's a bootstrap task. So let's just run that. And it looks like what that's going to do is it's going to seed the database with a bunch of data to start off with. And we can see what that looks like if we have a look at our output, I think, or debug console. There we go. There we go. All questions imported. Looks good. All right. And then launch all to run the application, debug the application. So this seems like it's launching two different tasks. There's a back-end task and a front-end task. And it looks like what that's going to do is spin up a few different processors, make those ports available if I want to visit them directly. But it says the application is going to be available on port 4280. So I'm guessing port 4000 is probably my backend. And what other ports? 3000 might be, oh no, there we go. Port 4000 is our front end API, I think, from, and there we go. We've got port 3000 and port 4280. Well, that started. So let's hit this one. If we go to the ports, we can see what ports are open. We'll hit the open in browser and see what this app looks like. All right, well, the first thing we need to do is sign in using GitHub. This looks like a web apps auth. I'm just going to choose a username and see if that does it. Log in. Great, this is emulated, so it doesn't actually do anything. I can start a new game. This looks like it's a quiz app. It's got my name from when I logged in. We'll join that game. There's nobody else playing, so let's just start. All right, domain name for Tuvalu. TV, submit. CSS, okay. Cascading style sheet. Looks like there's a little bug there. Maybe we'll get to that at some point. All right, so we're up and running. You know, we can debug, we can run the application. It looks like I'm pretty ready to go. So I might not actually need Anthony to deliver those docs anyway. It sounds like he's coming back actually anyway. So Anthony.
Hey, phew. All right, so Damien, I've got some good news and some not so good news to share with you. Okay, so I've tracked down the documentation,
Right.
but it will be much later today before I can get a developer to check that it's up to date and those sorts of things.
I think we're probably okay, actually, Anthony. The team seems to use code spaces. So they've already set up an environment where I can just start working. So I'm good to go. What stuff do you want me to work on?
Okay, well, I remember it used to take a couple of days, so that's amazing. All right, well, I know that Michelle is the PM on the project you're going to be working on, so I can try and get a meeting with her a little bit later today. For the moment, let me go and see if she's got any doco. So stand by. I'll try and find some work for you. So I'll get right back to you.
Okay, yeah, it looks like he's gone already. I've got open issues though, so I can just probably start working on one of them, I guess. This one's a high priority one. You can see from the label that's there. The randomization of questions is not working. Now, I didn't run that twice, but it sounds like they're always asked in the same order. So I'm guessing if I run it again, I'll get the Tuvalu question. All right. Well, let's just go over here and assign that work to me, just so other people know that I'm going to be working on that. Okay, and we'll jump over back into our code space. Cool. Now, I don't actually know where to start working on this problem. So where do we go? All right, all the questions to be asked randomly, but they're asked in the same order. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the relatively new features of GitHub, which is the code search and code view. Now, these kind of just appear as part of the UI. It's just a bit of an improvement in what, you know, the way that GitHub kind of, you know, looks at this kind of code. So, or lets you look at the code. So let's just go to search for random and see what comes up. All right. Oh, there's a utils file here. That looks pretty. There we go. Incorrect answers randomized. Array randomizer from util. Yeah, it really looks like that utils file is probably what I want to look at. All right, and we can see, look, right now we've got a few different things that you can see on the screen right now. It looks familiar to most kind of editors. There's the file tree or the folder tree on the left, so we can, you know, navigate through our code base. And then in the middle, we've got what looks like an editor, I suppose. But then we've got the ability on the right to kind of examine these symbols. So this array randomizer, if I put that code, if I click on that, you can see on the right, it's recognized that as a function. And in this file, here's where that function is referenced. And then across the code base, here are the references to that file. So we can see there's one in question.ts. Okay. Yeah, and it looks like it's randomizing answers. And then the query.ts is randomizing answers as well. But noticeably, there's nothing that's using this function, at least with the questions. Look, this sounds like a good place to look to kind of solve that problem when I actually get to that. So that's the randomizer. Let's see. What else should I look at? Let's look for where would I find this? So let's think about it. When we create a game, other people need to join the game as well, which means that the questions aren't going to be generated when people join. It's going to be generated when the game is created. And so we clicked on that new game link. So let's see if we can find a new game. Now, I could click on the question mark there. Sorry, the magnifying glass there to do the query. But I can also use keyboard shortcuts in the UI as well. I can't remember what search is though, so I can hit the question mark. And if I hit question mark, it gives me this kind of cheat sheet, all of the keyboard shortcuts, just in case you're looking for ways to navigate around the UI much quicker. And so open search bar is S or slash. All right, we'll just do that. S, great. Let's look for new game. Look at that. Start new game. Let's start there and see what happens. All right, starting new game. It's using states. I'm not super familiar with how all this works. Use mutation, create game document. Yeah, that sounds like it's probably what we want to look for. Use mutation, create game document. Schema. I don't think that's right. Oh, here we go. There's a create game function that it's calling. What does that do? All right. And it looks like that's calling create game is that function there. Game data source. And there's an in-memory version and a Cosmos one. Well, let's look at Cosmos. Click into there and okay, maybe this is the spot that I want to look at, where it's getting the questions and it's just choosing the top 10. If it's not randomizing, maybe that's a good spot to randomize. So let's just highlight that line. Oh, not highlight that line. We can copy that line or reference it in a new issue if we wanted to do that. Or even look at who changed that just in case there's a bug or something like that. Or if I want to send that line to somebody to verify that that's what I want, there's a permalink to this commit of that line as well. So if it changes in the future, I can always point back to this version. I'm not going to do any of those things at the moment. What I'm going to do is remember that this is game data source. I'll jump back over to my, my code space, and I'm going to do Control P or Command P and go look for game data source. And it was the Cosmos one. Right, and jump straight to that file. All right, where was it? It was just down here, questions. Now, this is using a bunch of stuff. It's using TypeScript. It's using a whole lot of things that I'm not super familiar with. So I'm going to ask Copilot to help me out with this. Now, I know that there is the randomize in utils. So we're importing something from utils. I know this much. So let's see if we can import the other thing as well. Array randomizer. There we go. Array randomizer. Okay, we'll import that, and then I'm going to ask Copilot to kind of fill this in for me. So let's use a comment. To randomize the questions. Now, I'm also just noticing that Copilot is not responding to me very well at the moment. So, oh, there we go. Okay. So Copilot has suggested this based on the comment that I made up here. So you can see it's not just the line before, it's the one above. I also noticed that it was doing a slice before to get, yeah, there we go, get the first 10. So I'm just going to let Copilot fill that in for me as well. Great. So that's probably going to solve that problem. And I debug that and I work out whether this is actually solving the problem that I have. Just because I want to show you something, I'm going to have a look at that next issue that was there as well. So let's quickly look at that issue and say, increase random game ID. So it looks like we're getting a lot of users, and that random game ID was 4, but now it needs to be 6. So I did notice in our utils, so let's go to the utils file, another function called ID generator. Now, I could look at this and kind of work out what it's doing, but if I'm not terribly familiar with the language, I might want to use Copilot. And in my case, I managed to get access to Copilot chat and try and get some answers about what that code does. The first thing I need to do, though, in my case, is open my VS Code locally. The code space that's running in the cloud doesn't actually have access to VS Code desktop. So I'm just going to open this code space in my local machine. Now, to show you this, I'm just going to have to stop sharing and share a different window. So bear with me for 1 sec while I do this. I'm just going to stop sharing this one, and I will share a different window, which is my Visual Studio Code locally. Now you'll notice that this is a local VS Code. It's not running in the browser anymore, but it's still connecting through to that same code space. So right down here on the bottom left, you can see we're editing on code spaces. If I go to the terminal, you can see that I'm connected to that code space here. And let's just ignore all of the warnings about Copilot voice again. And continue. So, all right, where were we? We were looking at the utils. So let's look at utils on the back end. And I don't really know what this does. So I'm going to highlight this code here, this export function. And I'm going to go to Copilot chat and say, explain the selected code. Right. Okay, so it says the selected code is a TypeScript module that exports a function called ID generator. Great. Generates a random 4-character string. Okay, so that does look like the 4-character randomizing. So can you update this to return 6 characters? See what it gives me. Oh, and the response got filtered. All right, let me try one more time. Worth mentioning as well that the chat is obviously a work in progress. We are announcing these things. Let's see if I can reword this. Let's see if that will give it to me. Again. All right, let's see what this bit does, and let's see if we can get it to give me an answer. All right. Selected code to return 6 characters. Being able to type 6 characters. Let's see how we go. There we go. All right, so that looks a lot better. And then we will just use this link here to replace what's there with what's new. I also want to to see if it'll do this for me as well. So let's clear this. I've highlighted this text. Can you write a few unit tests for the selected version? See what Copilot can help me. Okay. So it's gone ahead and written some sample unit tests for that ID generator code as well. So you can see this Copilot chat is much more of a conversational piece, I guess, than it is a ask it for a piece of code. Anyway, looks like I'm well on my way to answering both of those questions. I'm just going to stop sharing and jump back to the other one, but I think Anthony's coming back, which is useful because I think I need to tell him that I'm nearly running out of things to work on. Anthony, you're back? Oh, and I can't hear you at the moment. Let's see.
It's not a good session unless you forget mute, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's entirely required. Yeah. That's right.
All right. So the good news is I found Michelle, and we can get a meeting for you this afternoon to find some work for you to get started on. How's that suit?
Yeah, great. I think I've finished that work though. So let's see if we can have that meeting to work out what's next.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
and
thanks, Amy. Let's break out of our personas now. I should have had a tie or something else as a manager, I think.
You exude manager, Anthony. It's fine.
Excellent. All right. So let's have a look at some questions here. There's been a few questions come in there. Let's start from the top one there. Is the old GitHub Copilot using GPT-4?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to answer this in a couple of parts. The first answer is no, not right now, as far as I know. The second answer is that when we're developing Copilot, or when the GitHub Next team and the GitHub Copilot team are developing Copilot, what they're really focusing on is having a great balance between what you get, like the day-to-day, here's a suggestion, and whether it's likely to be what you want, and accuracy and performance. So it turns out that Copilot being built on the Codex model, which was the one specifically trained for writing code, it gives you really, really good results for generating code, for creating code from comments or working out what you're doing next. As a result, you're much more likely to get better performance with those specifically tuned models than you might with a generic model like GPT-4. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that GPT-4 won't become part of the Copilot product in its in the future, or it's maybe under testing now. I don't actually know. But the main focus that the team is looking for is not, are we using the biggest, most expensive model, but are we using the model that gives the best results? Which is, a little bit of a way of dodging the answer, I guess, but it kind of speaks to the focus the team has on delivering something that's genuinely useful rather than just the new shiny device.
Fantastic. Please, for anyone that has any questions, please jump across into the tab at the top right, and you'll see Q&A. Please drop any questions in there that you have for either Damien and I, but I've got a few more to continue with. There's a question here that says, does Copilot detect the chars string as password, like so not continue? So not continue?
I'm just having a look for that one.
So look at that on the screen in front of you there. See that constant chars equals QWERTY?
Constant chars equals... yes. So what was the question, sorry?
Does Copilot detect the chars string as password, like so not to continue?
Interesting. So you mean if I asked Copilot to finish this off for me?
Not sure. If we can get a little bit of extra clarity there in the chat window, we'd be happy to. We'll loop back to that and find out exactly what that question was about. Okay, sorry. So someone said there that it's probably a question related to gas. So we might step away from that just for a moment.
Got it.
There's another question here. It wasn't actually a question. It was dropped into the chat window, Damien. And it says, Copilot, does Copilot read our code? So it means that our code is not safe. Well, that's a concern. And it's a concern for Damo Vista Inc. as well. What can you say about Copilot reading our code?
Yeah, definitely. So unfortunately, I can't show you this because and I'll explain why in a second, but if you are using Copilot for individuals, you're able to go into your settings for Copilot and change your profile settings to uncheck a checkbox or check a checkbox. I can't remember which way around it is, to say, do not use the suggestions and the code that I send to Copilot to improve the model. What you're actually saying there is when Copilot in your IDE or when in your editor sends information up to the server to ask for a suggestion, which it will have to do because it needs the context of what you're trying to do. What happens is it runs it through the Copilot model and the filters and all sorts of stuff that we have on the server. It makes suggestions, and again, we run through filters and make sure that what we're giving you is the best quality we can, and we send it back. Now, the request that you sent, which contains information about what you were doing, maybe which files you had open, some functions, some code just before, all sorts of stuff. If you have that checkbox set to say, do not use my code to tune the model, we immediately throw that out. It never gets used in that model again. That is gone. So that's Copilot for individuals. You can uncheck that if you don't want. We won't see that code beyond giving you a suggestion. Right? It won't get used to tune the model. For Copilot for business, we don't use that at all. So your organization can also set the policy, right, to say, do not use any of my code to tune the Copilot model. So if you have it set in a particular way that says, yes, you can absolutely use the code that I send to Copilot to tune the model, that code may hit our models for some fine tuning or to work out, hey, when you said this, I made this suggestion and that turned out to be a good suggestion or a bad suggestion. We use that to tune that model a little bit better, but you can absolutely turn that off. I think that was a long-winded answer, but I think that does cover what we were looking at, yeah.
You did very, very well. There's another question here. How does GitHub Copilot work, and what are the advantages of using it over other language models like ChatGPT-4?
Yeah, definitely. So how does it work? A lot of this is beyond, I was going to say beyond my pay grade, but let's just go with beyond my knowledge. The way I understand that it works is that as you're typing in your file, GitHub Copilot looks for opportunities to give you a good suggestion. So you'll notice as well, if you have used it, that, for example, right here, if I go to the M at the end and I stop typing, Copilot has made a suggestion. It thinks, yeah, this is a pretty good thing to add here. So it's worked out that right now, there's an addition that it could make in here, right? However, if I go up, and I'm just going to see if I can work that out. If I put a semicolon there, that's really a sign that I've finished that thought. And Copilot's not going to interject and say, well, actually, after your semicolon, here's some other characters you could type. But if I hit enter, then Copilot's much more likely to say, okay, well, here's the next thing you should do. In this case, it didn't. It decided that it couldn't actually be helpful at that point. So that's the first thing it does. It looks for opportunities to help you. When it finds an opportunity to help you, it will send some context about what you're trying to do. So this could be the code around what you're working on, other files you have open, some details about what other files are in your folder, language you're working on. The contents of that, what we call prompt engineering, the contents of that kind of prompt, the context that we give the Copilot server, we don't give you access to that, and I don't know what that contains, but there are some incredibly smart people who work on that problem. What's the best context to give Copilot? On the server, we run it through a number of filters, as well as that codex model, or our custom kind of descendant of the codex model, the Copilot large language model. And we make suggestions to do with, what the next few characters, what the next piece of code should be. We also run that through some other filters, things like, is the code that we're about to give you, does it contain a vulnerability, like a SQL injection vulnerability? And we will filter those out, so you won't get those suggestions. Now that feature was announced a little while ago alongside Copilot for Business being made available. The model has improved, and we've added some of these extra features to kind of prevent that those bad responses from happening. When those responses are collected, we send them back to your editor, back to Visual Studio Code, or wherever you are using Copilot, and we make that suggestion as ghost text. So that's the gray text, and if you want to accept it, you hit tab. Now, the advantages of using this over ChatGPT or GPT-4 or something like that, you may have already picked up that context of this is what I'm doing and this is what is relevant to the task I'm performing right now, and constructing that prompt as a result to give to the large language models. That's honestly the real power of Copilot. You could easily paste all of this code into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you explain this function? And it probably would be able to do a decent job. But it won't know about the other functions in the file alongside the one you're working on. Or it won't know necessarily that, when you previously wrote a function like this, this is what it looked like. So that is why Copilot focuses on kind of working with you and what code you're working on at the moment, what problem you're trying to solve. Yeah, so that was, again, long-winded answer. I'm good at those, aren't I, Anthony?
Well,
but I think,
sorry, to add to that, if you jump across into, ChatGPT or jump across into Stack Overflow or anything like that, you're really copying and pasting content there and then searching results. scrolling through to find the right one. And I think Copilot does a very good job of making a great recommendation. I think the percentages of first acceptance or acceptance of that first suggestion are actually very, very good. But the ability for you to then say, just use a key sequence or click and open up an extra a tab in the IDE to see alternate suggestions. I mean, it's all there. It's while you're in the flow. It's while you're in that IDE. And, avoiding the context switching as a human makes us a lot more productive. Yeah. So another question for you, Damien. Can GitHub Copilot generate entire code snippets or only code suggestions?
Great question. And it depends probably what you mean by entire code snippets or suggestions. So I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, actually, who was asking, can we tell Copilot to always include a comment at the start of each function it creates? And what struck me about that, aside from the individual question, was that they tended to use it to write entire functions for them, or it sounded like that was the use case. For me, when I use it, I tend to get more value out of it suggesting the rest of the line or the next couple of lines rather than the whole function. But by way of example, we're still looking at my screen, so I can do this. If I wanted to do, I don't know, random email, and then said, there we go, let's see how good my typing is right now, and then ask Copilot, that's generated a whole function with a random email address. It's chosen Gmail, but let's see if we can improve that by saying or Outlook or Bing. Is Bing a one? No, Yahoo or whatever. There we go. Thank you. It even finished that for me. And then I changed this code. It's used Gmail. So it's doing a little bit at a time. Random email provider, and then I could get it to build that function for me as well. So this little example, literally off the top of my head, getting all that code generated, that whole big chunk generated, it can do things like that. However, I can't ask it to do, can you write an application that is a to-do app for my company using Node, and it will fill out multiple files. It's not going to do that for me. So that level of how much it gives you and in what scenario varies based very much on what you're doing at the time. Anthony, I mean, I don't know how much you've played with this, but do you use it a different way, or have you seen people using it a different way?
No, I think you've covered it really, really well there. It depends on the context you're in, the prompts that you give it, as to how much it can do there. I'm going to sneakily answer a couple of questions in the way that I respond to your question. For example, you've been showing a couple of specific languages, but the Copilot can do so much more than just JavaScript, TypeScript, etc. So something that I love to demonstrate is using infrastructure as code, using things like an ARM template. I can go in there and put a comment that says, I want to deploy a virtual machine or whatever you like into this region, this something or other. And I've seen it generate literally hundreds of lines of ARM template for me. Now, remember, that's not something I would then go and deploy. It's it's basically putting all of the scaffolding there for me based on the prompts that I've given it. It's putting in the relevant information, but then it's a pair programmer. My job is to then go through, look at those lines. Oh, that's right. I needed to specify the network to join. I go and add that. I look at a section and go, well, that's not really relevant for me. So I can delete that out. So of course we could use Terraform for this. We could use ARM templates, Bicep, you name it. So much more than really just the code that we've seen. So I sneakily answered an extra question in responding to you then, Damien.
Oh, of course. That's what we do.
Another question here, and this is going to be a chain of 3 questions for you. What's the difference between Copilot and Copilot X?
Right. So Copilot is the AI pair programmer that you know and love. It's been out for a while. It also kind of represents the product, the AI in your developer experience product. Copilot X is almost like our mark on this is what we want Copilot to do for everybody in the future, right? So there may be other products named, Copilot for Copilot Chat or something like that, but they're all going to be part of that Copilot brand. You can think of Copilot X as this is the future of Copilot. This is what we're working on. It's the broad idea of AI improving your developer experience. And it's not, obviously Copilot is not the only way that we're improving developer experience. You saw how quickly I got a code space up and running and navigating through the code just in the browser as well with the code search and things like that. Copilot X is kind of focused on this is what Copilot is going to be, what we think the developer experience that's AI enabled is going to be.
Mm-hmm. The follow-up question then is, should I be scared by Copilot X?
Should you be scared by it? I would hope, I would hope you'd be excited by it. I am lucky in that I've had access to these tools for a little bit of time. And you may have seen some of the ones we announced with Copilot X. There was the chat that you just saw. There was Copilot for Docs, which allows you to kind of have a chat GPT kind of experience, but focusing really specifically on documentation, including references to where that documentation came from in the response, and also the CLI. So those 3 tools I've actually been using a lot in my day-to-day work. And it's not replacing me as a developer. It's just making me more productive. It's meaning that I don't have to do as much work to get results, I guess. So, I would like to think that people are excited by it. It's definitely a productivity improvement for me.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of questions here around, has any pricing been announced for Copilot X?
No, not yet. So Copilot X is it's our vision of the future. None of those things are products that you can go out and buy right now. There are wait lists if you want to join the wait lists to hopefully try them, but we haven't made decisions on pricing or the product side of it yet.
All right. There's some other really interesting questions here. I found one here that's a little bit of more of an opinion piece. So let me ask, are you seeing any changes in how interviews are being conducted or hiring practices, given the current era of generative AI models and tools like ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, etc.?
Great question. I haven't personally, but I'm not really in the space where I would, if I'm honest. I have heard those discussions elsewhere though, but you might have had a bit more of experience on that.
Yeah, I guess in just thinking that through, and I chose it because it was a non-technical question. I wanted to give good coverage of some of the questions coming in. I guess take-home coding tests are likely to be a thing of the past now. If you can bring a take-home coding test home and just throw it into a generative AI like this, I guess that would have diminished value over what we've used that for in the past. But yeah, no, that's quite an interesting one there. I'd like to sort of relax and think about that for a little bit of time and see what the future holds for us.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's go back to there's another few good technical questions here. This could be interesting. How does GitHub Copilot handle complex coding scenarios or edge cases?
Great question. It's going to be one of those consultant answers of it depends. What I will say though is it's quite good at working out what your code looks like and what your code is doing. So if, for example, there's an edge case or something that you do that is not something that's done in the general public, right? Let's imagine the billions of lines of code that and spoken language that Copilot has been trained on. If they're in that big corpus of training material, if you're doing something fairly unique, then it's unlikely to give you that suggestion very easily. However, if you've done it 3 or 4 times in other files or earlier in that file, then it's going to pick that up from the context and do a reasonably good job of it. It's hard to answer that question, I guess, without knowing the actual use case or without actually just sitting there and trying it, I suppose. Yeah, one thing I want to get across, I guess, is that I know we have a million questions about Copilot, but Copilot is just another tool in this suite of tools that GitHub is putting together, all focused on that developer productivity. So in that case, if you have a really specific use case and Copilot is not giving you, the exact stuff that you want, that shouldn't ideally slow you down. I mean, if you're sitting there fighting with Copilot to get it to generate the code that you want to generate, you're probably not using it as a tool. You're using it to solve the problem that you have a bit forcefully, I guess. So if you think of it just as another tool, along with the suite of other tools we have as well. And I know that Copilot is absolutely front of mind, and I think we could probably do an entire GitHub Galaxy purely just showing off Copilot stuff. But I do want to look at some of the other things that we've spoken about as well. I know that a lot of the questions are coming in about Copilot, but I don't know whether we got anything about the code spaces part or the code search or the code.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
There was a question on the code spaces. There is. Is it possible to locally commit to code spaces and then push it later from the VS Code editor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a code space is essentially a machine or some compute in the cloud that has a VS Code instance, or it has some compute, basically. You don't actually have to use VS Code to use code spaces. Usually, and traditionally as well, you've started a code space from a repository, but you don't have to. So you could start, for example, a blank canvas. So this is the github.com/codespaces page. If you go there while you're logged in, you can just say, use a template, a blank canvas, and then start using a code space, which is this machine in the cloud with a blank canvas, nothing installed on it, just a starting point. And that code, whatever you put in here, doesn't exist in a repository until you put it in there. So you can think of this like a machine that you have that instead of being next to you, it will be in the cloud. So at the end of this, I could just stop this code space and delete it. And the code doesn't live on GitHub anymore anyway, right? It's just a machine in the cloud. So in answer to that specific question, can I just work on a code space and then commit it to a repository later on? Yeah, absolutely. And this is how you would do it. Cool. I'm not sure if Anthony's frozen there.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
I'm trying to cognitively manage all the windows and those sorts of things. So let me go back. There was a question. I noticed that you ambitiously, when you were my team member, went in there and chose a 16-core machine. In terms of just trying to be mindful of costs of this compute power and so forth, is there anything we can do to manage or control that?
There is, yes. I was hoping you wouldn't notice that, boss. So you can manage that as well. So if I go to my organization and then I go to settings, it seems that I've been granted admin permissions to this organization, by the way, Anthony. You should probably look at that. If I scroll down to code spaces and expand that setting, I can set policies for my organization. Now, right now, I have a policy of appropriate machines, which is set to an 8-core or a 16-core machine. Now, that is only applied to one repository. So if I had a different repository that needed, I don't know, but I only wanted to give people small machines, I can add constraints like the machine types that they're allowed to use, what ports they can make accessible, how long they stay alive for, which obviously, and retention period, which obviously directly impacts how much I'm paying for them. And I can even set which base images they can use as well. So if I require certain components or tools installed on my code space for whatever reason, I can set a base image so that code space needs to be set up with that as the base image. So for machine types, I can say I'm only allowing a 2-core machine for this project, and that only applies to this particular repository, or it applies to all repositories. So yeah, you do have a fair bit of control over the policies of what people can do in code spaces in your organization.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go back to Copilot. It seems to be a very, very popular topic for us.
Fair enough.
So, this one could be a little bit interesting. Will the use of Copilot in dev teams require fewer developers than without Copilot use?
Yeah, we have heard that feedback a lot, and it's kind of a typical piece of feedback for when new technologies come around. Is this going to mean that people get replaced by the technology as well? Where you sit on that topic, I guess, is going to depend on who you are and what your opinions are on it. But what we have found that it does do is the existing developers in your organization are more. So 2 things really. They're more able to deliver meaningful, useful code in a shorter period of time, which as an organization, I would really want that to be a case of, hey, we can deliver more valuable features in a shorter period of time with the same number of people. So it does that. But the other thing which we have talked about in the past is it tends to make the developers happier. And that sounds like a weird thing to kind of focus on, especially from a business perspective. But there's plenty of research out there that shows that, I guess, happier developers, or when people are more content with their job, they create better content, they produce better code. So yeah, whether that means you can fire half of your developers and still get the same kind of throughput, or whether you can make your existing developers happier and more productive and therefore deliver more features, fix more bugs, and do more work. I can't tell you how to navigate that particular issue, but I would say that the existing number of developers and more productivity and more useful features definitely appeals to me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a very common question to hear, and in my experience, it's always a matter of the product backlog usually far exceeds our ability to deliver that value in a timely way. So what I think is it's going to result in our businesses coming up with more ideas and more things they want to do, and developers being able to use these extra tools in their tool belt to deliver that value at a faster pace. So yeah, I think that's how I'd look at it myself. Another question there: does Copilot work for non-English languages? Say I want to write comments and prompts in French. How's your French, Damien?
My French is terrible, but let's just So what's interesting with Copilot is that because it's a large language model that sits underneath, but it's been tuned for code, that doesn't necessarily mean that it only knows how to write code. So I do this a surprising amount, actually. So, okay, now I know French. Let's just, if I write the comments, actually, you know what, that's not going to be a very good, useful comment, but let's see if it'll do this. By the way, this is the thing that they always say not to do in demos, is stuff that you have never tried before, but here we go. How's your French, Anthony? Is that accurate?
Oh, oui.
Okay, great. Excellent.
It's terrible.
So array randomizer. I mean, that was probably a bad example because it's picked up exactly what this is. I don't know.
Let me jump in there. A demonstration one of my SEs often does, and he is multilingual, is he'll say create an array of months, and he'll start typing the abbreviation for January in Italian, and it will then automatically propose all of the months to put in that array in Italian. I've seen that done in Indonesian, lots of other spoken languages, which I think's really, really amazing.
Yeah, I did this in Japan actually at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and that example of here is a phrase that I want converted to Japanese. I mean, you can see that this seems to have done a reasonably good job. It's understood what I've asked for, at least. Yeah, it can be pretty surprisingly useful in a number of ways. Building JSON databases of translated code and things like translated text and things like that. Now, again, just as with your code, I wouldn't necessarily trust that translation is exactly what you want. Just like writing code, you want to check that with a developer who knows how to write the code. Just as with language translation, you'd probably want to check that with somebody who speaks the language, right, to make sure it's correct rather than relying on it. But yeah, in answer to the question, there you go. All right,
yeah, and I like it. I mean, we've used the term many times during our session here today, pair programmer. It doesn't replace the developer at all. It makes developers more productive. All right, I might get you to stop sharing and go back to the slides there for me, Damien. So
Sure,
while you do that, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. We do have 2 more days of fantastic sessions to go. Damien's quickly finding the slide for me, I'm sure.
I am. Hey, here we go.
Woohoo! Tomorrow we're focusing on security, starting out with a fireside chat with panelists from Razorpay and Flipkart, followed by an interactive forum where my colleagues Brent and Shlomi will chat about how to scale your security team. And then on Friday, we're joined by panelists from the Commonwealth Bank, KPMG, and Udan chatting about team collaboration, followed by a fun session with Karthik and Shilpa, where they'll bust some common GitHub myths and how to improve your DevOps tool chain. Now, if you'd like a deeper dive into anything that we've covered here today, you can basically just click the button at the top right of your screen and we can be in touch with you shortly. If you'd like to know more about code spaces and see how you can spin up developer machines in next to no time, you'll see there's a link there, aka.ms/codespaces, and you may be eligible for up to 60 hours free per month to help you get started. So a great way to learn this is to use it and see what you can come up with. To learn more about code search and how it can help you navigate your code far more efficiently, the next link there is gh.io/code search. And I think, Damien, the big winner in terms of the number of questions today was all about Copilot. So if Copilot gets you really excited, visit gh.io/Copilot and sign up for a trial. There's a free trial available for GitHub for individuals. And then you can also take a look at what's coming up. Some of our forward-looking experiments in Copilot X. You can join waitlists there and see what's available now at gh.io/Copilot X. I need more coffee and it's late in the day already. All right, so lastly, please take just a minute or two to complete a short survey about your experience with us here today. You'll find a link to that survey in the Documents tab at the right of your screen in Resources or in the chat. We designed this program for you and we want to be sure that you're getting the most value out of your time here. We do take this feedback and our learnings to optimize our future programs to continue to help raise the bar for you. So don't be shy. Tell us what you think. And with that, I wanted to say a very heartfelt thank you from myself. Thank you for joining us, spending some time with us. Damien, I'm sure you agree. We kept you busy with a lot of those questions.
You did. Yeah, that was fun though. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you next time. And make sure you stay tuned for the next 2 days of amazing GitHub Galaxy content.
Thank you.